What's up, everyone? Thanks for joining us today. My name is Justin O'Connell with GoldSilverBitcoin.com. This is the news with GoldSilverBitcoin.com on Hitler's birthday, April 20th, 2020. It's fitting because our first story today is the Great Lockdown reminds Holocaust survivors of Nazi Germany. The Great Lockdown is what the IMF has termed the reaction to the coronavirus pandemic in order to stamp down like a boot the virus, which has been termed an invisible enemy by many. And the IMF predicts that this will result in the biggest depression since the Great Depression of the 30s. And I see headlines all over the world about people fearing that they may starve. However, in the U.S., we're all in this together with our cute face masks, etc. In this story, the Times of Israel interviewed, and you can find the story at goldsilverbitcoin.com. The Times of Israel interviewed Holocaust survivors about their feelings on the current environment, and many of them had some surprising statements about that. It reminds them of a time earlier in their lives, particularly Olga Weiss. Says that the Great Lockdown, reminds her of the time in which she hid for 2 years from Nazis in Germany with her parents. Of course, apparently for elderly Jews, the coronavirus pandemic has caused feelings of fear, uncertainty, and helplessness that they have not felt since Nazi Germany. And as Yael Danieli says, she's a psychologist and director of the Group Project for Holocaust Survivors and Their Children, says, quote, Holocaust survivors are not living through this, they are reliving it. According to her, some Holocaust survivors see their role in the coronavirus pandemic as setting an example of how to survive, how to fight back. She says that the stay-at-home orders feel like a, quote, return of the horrific times when you had to hide from the world in order to survive. According to Colette Avital, whose mother, I believe, was a Holocaust survivor, who in her dying days used to wake up with night tears screaming the Nazis are coming, Colette says that the coronavirus lockdown, quote, has got them panic-stricken, as it should. Weiss lives in a suburb of Chicago, Olga, and she works with a group of about 20 other hidden children from the Holocaust. So that is those who had to hide as children from the Nazis, whether that be like in Anne Frank's example in a cupboard, or in many cases perhaps under the floorboards. Weiss says, quote, it feels the same. It is the same fear of what will happen to us that we had at the beginning of our lives, now at the end. Moving on, we've got a next story in the economy section on Gold, Silver, Bitcoin, as well as the silver section. The story Coronavirus, U.S. Mint suspends gold, silver bullion production at West Mint. The story essentially details that the U.S. Mint has cut production at its West Mint facility where bullion products are minted, fearing the risk that people will get COVID-19. So the Mint director, David J. Ryder, said, quote, my commitment to the health and safety of the Mint workforce is unwavering and continues to be my highest priority. These are challenging and unprecedented times, and decisions on Mint operations are made with the best interests of Mint employees first and foremost. Commerce Bank warns that the temporary shutdown could result in a shortage of supply, particularly for gold coins, according to the bank. Silver coins appear to have been in even greater demand than gold, I think they mean, and in some cases were even sold out. The figures show that just shy of 5.5 million ounces were sold in March. The timing is awful, according to Everett Millman, a precious metals specialist at Gainesville Coins in Florida. He says that the Mint shutdown will exacerbate the supply shortage, and we've seen Mint across the world shut down in order to protect their employees. Royal Canadian Mint has shut down in Canada, and I believe the Austrian Mint shut down. The U.S. Mint at West Point is shut down. I believe the Perth Mint is still open, producing gold and silver. So if you're out there looking for a precious metals product, that your options are probably in the department are coming out of Australia at this point. So Michael White, a Mint spokesman, said that some silver bullion production has been transported to its Philadelphia facility, and that during the suspension of operations at West Point, Philadelphia will mint American Eagle and America the Beautiful silver coins, While American Eagle and American Buffalo gold coins will not be available right now on the market, we are able to get gold eagles and gold buffaloes. At least last I checked a few days ago, and according to the news out of the mint, this could very quickly change, and you won't be able to get either a U.S. minted silver nor gold. The West Point facility will be cleaned per CDC guidelines, and yeah, so we've also not only seen the mint closing, but the question is like, will the mines begin to close? And then will there be a shortage of not only the nationally minted coins, but rather the raw material silver itself? Something that has yet to be seen, and that we'll be keeping an eye on here at goldsilverbitcoin.com for sure. So moving on, we got the next story. The next story is Smithfield CEO, which is a pork processing plant, says, quote, "We are either going to produce food or not." After 200 employees reportedly had come down with COVID-19, Smithfield Foods shuttered its Sioux Falls, South Dakota pork processing facility, where 4 to 5% of the U.S. production takes place. As the chief executive officer Ken Sullivan said, the closure of this facility, combined with a growing list of other protein plants that have shuttered across our industry, is pushing our country perilously close to the edge in terms of our meat supply. It is impossible to keep our grocery store stocked if our plants are not running. The shuttered meat plants join trucking bottlenecks and jam port traffic to contribute to supply chain concerns. Smithfield is owned by a Hong Kong listed WH group. The South Dakota facility employs 3,700 people who will receive pay for at least 2 weeks while the plant is closed, and the plant won't reopen until local, state, and federal authorities issue further directions. Sullivan said further, quote, "Unfortunately, COVID-19 cases are now ubiquitous across the country. The virus is afflicting communities everywhere. The agriculture and food sectors have not been immune. We have continued to run our facilities for one reason: to sustain our nation's food supply during this pandemic." Sullivan added that we have a stark choice as a nation. We are either going to produce food or not, even in the face of COVID-19. The coronavirus pandemic is limiting meat supplies in supermarkets. Thousands of meat plant workers are under stay-at-home orders across the U.S., and so meat suppliers are reducing the range of cuts that they sell to the supermarkets. B&R Stores, Inc. is a Midwestern grocery chain, and it saw meat sales jump 30% in the past month. Suppliers are only filling 75% of the meat orders, according to President Mark Griffin, and B&R is limiting customers to one 10-pound roll of ground beef while offering fewer varieties of leanness. And Mr. Griffin says, quote, "We are very concerned about the fresh meat. We have fresh meat today, but there are indicators that it will be a problem in the future." Meat processors Smithfield, Tyson Foods, JBS USA Holdings, and Cargill Inc. are providing bonus pay to those workers who are working currently, and they're also trying to adhere to social distancing guidelines during shifts. But meat industry officials fear that the supply shortage could worsen. Despite the concerns, U.S. meat supplies are high due to closed restaurants, so that there is a lot of meat that is still available in cold storage. And however, the number of cattle slaughtered the week ending April 11th fell 14%, and the number of hogs slaughtered fell 6%. The number of chickens processed declined by 25%. Moving on to our next story. So we've covered already kind of the Great Lockdown's effect on Holocaust survivors, the U.S. Mint shutting down Smithfield, and basically worrying about possible meat shortages upon its closing. And then the next story is global fund managers see extreme investor pessimism. And this is a Bank of America survey. And Bank of America also recently predicted that the bailouts are going to need to reach $8 trillion before they're over. The program is over. And Bank of America's survey of global fund managers showed extreme investor pessimism regarding cash held to the bleak outlook they hold for the global economy. So not only do they have a pessimism regarding how much cash is being held, which kind of is symptomatic of the sentiment of people. They want to stay in cash as opposed to investing in any assets because they anticipate that assets across the board will decline. Um, but also, they just have a bleak outlook generally for the global economy. Uh, Elliott Management, which holds 40.4 billion in assets, it controls 40.4 billion in assets, said global stocks might lose half or more of their value from the high reached in February, and they predict a 1930s-esque Great Depression. The New York-based hedge fund wrote that the sharp market decline seen between late February and late March provided a heavy bookend to a dozen years of basically nonstop positive returns in global stocks, bonds, and real estate. The firm went on, quote, our gut tells us that a 50% or deeper decline from February's top might be the ultimate path of global stock markets. They do not anticipate a further plunge in global GDP, but in their view, global EPS cuts are just beginning. 63% of respondents to the April survey foresee profits that will deteriorate in the next year versus a net 2% who expect worse global growth in the next 2 months. The amount of cash held increases to 5.9% from 5.1%, which is the highest level since the September 11 terror attacks. So we're looking at higher market volatility, which has pushed cash levels higher by 10 to 30% in March, and that is a sign that fund managers are betting on a further stock market decline. 93% of fund managers anticipate a global recession in 2020. The Morgan Stanley CEO James Gorman estimates the coronavirus-induced depression could last through 2021. Quote, I think, through the end of next year, we're going to be working through this global recession, according to Gorman. He also says that of the global fund managers surveyed, the Bank of America found that of the global fund managers surveyed, 52% foresee a U-shaped recovery, 22% foresee a W-shaped recovery, and just 15% expect a V-shaped recovery. Equity allocation is at its lowest level since March 2009 when the S&P 500 touched its low of 666 during the global financial crisis. FMS investors are currently long cash, healthcare, staples, utilities, the United States, tech, bonds, while also shorting energy, equities, materials, industrials, the United Kingdom, banks, and the Eurozone. 57% of the global fund managers envision a second wave of COVID-19, followed by a systemic credit risk at 30%. Fund managers have minimized exposure to cyclical assets such as equities, banks, emerging markets, the Eurozone, and they've switched to staples, cash, tech, U.S. and healthcare assets. Record 50% of respondents said they were heavy cash, while the most crowded trades in the most recent survey are longs in U.S. government bonds, cash, U.S. dollars, U.S. tech, and growth stocks. Equity allocations fell 25 percentage points month over month to a net 27% underweight, which is the lowest level since March 2009. So these are just some of the stories that we've been looking at today at goldsilverbitcoin.com. You can check them out. Thank you for watching and stay safe.